know.
And now it looks like
Very good. It's 1 o'clock, and so we will begin the Fargo Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting for today. The agenda is number 1, approve Tax Exempt Review Committee minutes of 8/27/19. If you've had a chance to review them ahead of time, or if there are any changes and corrections, we'd love to hear that. Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 2, remodeling exemption application for former Rosie's Laundromat building. Application for exemption for improvements to building at 701 University Drive North. Ben?
Maybe I can
Sorry,
kind
Jim,
of take
sorry.
this one. They've applied for a remodeling exemption, including an expansion at 701 University Drive North. Our policy is if you're within the downtown, you're eligible for a 5-year exemption as well as an exemption on the expansion. This particular thing is right across the street from what we've identified as a downtown. However, the city has already zoned the property downtown mixed use, so it just isn't real clear cut. I tend to consider the site downtown. When you go by it, it's right across from the grocery store, right across on 7th Avenue, and certainly it has a downtown character built right to the property line. But because it wasn't clear cut, we just didn't move it on to the city commission agenda. We wanted to get the input from this committee on whether they'd be eligible for the 3-year exemption with no expansion eligible, or the 5-year exemption with the expansion. I guess I don't see that as a real hard line in the downtown, but wanted to consult with you. There's a representative here from the project. Want you, let me come over here and you can tell us a little bit about what you have planned. They can do a better job than me explaining the project.
And maybe while he's coming up, I'll just have a couple questions. The current estimated, I think it's on the 3rd or 4th page, but it was, the current estimated market value was $450,000, and the improvements that you're proposing making is $4 million, is that correct?
It is with the FF&E in there, so it's 3.2 million with the improvements of the building and the expansion and buying of the land, and then the FF&E on top of that.
Very good. And so if there are any other questions, and maybe if you want to talk about your plans, just summarize them a little bit for us, if you wouldn't mind. First of all, I apologize. Will you introduce yourselves?
Yes, I'm Shelby Turstrip. I'm one of the owners, along with Eric Myrie, and then my brother and sister-in-law, Alex Belquist and Britt Belquist. And we have other restaurants. We most recently renovated City Brew Hall in Wapaton. Our mission is really to kind of be a vibrant force in the neighborhood and to be part of renovation of a neighborhood. So we love restoring old buildings, and this is a really great opportunity to kind of bring life to that area. And so it will be a family-friendly restaurant that will be chef-driven with a rooftop patio, and will employ about 40 people, not full-time employees, but 40 altogether. And I think we're really excited.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anybody that has any questions about the project? So can I ask, is it a 5-year, or is that what's being proposed, Jim?
Yeah, their application is for the 5-year, and again, I think because we've already zoned it downtown mixed use and it's right across from our boundary, it seems like it would really fit with the downtown, but I wanted to confer with you on that. And maybe just the other thing to note is you noted the existing value, and that included a house that had to be removed that probably wasn't worth anywhere near what what the value was. And the building itself, I think it's only $150,000 is what it's on in tax rolls for now. So this would be a substantial improvement in the long term.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, the debate here is 3 years or 5 years. It's pretty straightforward, and I don't personally think the zoning has anything to do with it. We've got a map that clearly delineates where we were going to offer these incentives, and unfortunately, it's a discretionary call because they're about 40 feet off the line here. So that's what the dilemma is here. So,
for what it's worth, these typically aren't up for discussion or debate. There is the existing policy. The only conversation we've ever had on one that I can remember is when West Acres did a pretty major remodeling, and they specifically asked for the 5-year, even though they're outside of the downtown, and the city commission did grant that. So, I mean, this one seems pretty cut and dried. The only thing we might want to consider, we had kind of changed the boundaries of this map when we worked on the policy. We moved a few of the lines, and I'm wondering if, rather than the lines going down the street, if they should be the properties abutting those streets, because if something across the street qualifies, it would sure seem like they're in the same neighborhood. So maybe we want to think of looking at the map boundary too.
That's a good point. Any other comments or conversation, or are we ready for a motion? Well, maybe we should have some more discussion about that, I guess. That's the thing. What do people, I guess, your point, Ben, about the whole being on the street, is that a something that we want to consider? To me, it's a good point.
Well, I would certainly think so. I mean, it's an older property that is in somewhat decay, not any different than the same ones in that whole neighborhood, so. It seems it's got the same downtown atmosphere, and if you look at this line as we go down University, we went on both sides, so.
I guess from my perspective, the other thing is this building, so unfortunately, I've been here a long time, this building was in need of, they put a lot of repairs into it already, but it was in a state of severe decay. And even though it's not maybe hundreds of years old, it was an older building that instead of knocking it down, I'm very pleased that they preserved it.
I think the building was 1920, so it's almost 100 years old here.
And so, I mean, for our city, it was an older building, and, you know, it's been there a long time, so I'm from that perspective, I'm very glad that you saved it, because you can't replace them once you knock them down, and so that's my perspective.
Well, and I would think if we look at the policy on page 7 for this exemption, it reads, the exemption encourages the investment in private capital to improve properties, subsequently encouraging the production of wealth, improving the volume of employment, enhancing living conditions, preserving and increasing the property tax base. So it clearly meets our policy.
So you're saying we have we're conflicting between the policy and the map right now, is what we're in your?
Right, you see down in the table below, the distinction between the 3 and the 5 years is in the central business district.
Yeah.
So,
But for any property to qualify, it would have to meet this definition
right.
first.
Well, actually the table, for the most part. This is just the purpose of the exemption itself and us adopting the resolution to grant the exemption. And then we define the rules of what it takes to get the 3 or 5 year.
This particular project, a significant part of the improvement is the addition to. So, you know, that's the other distinction here, is that if it's in the downtown, then that addition would also be exempt, where if otherwise it's just remodeling of the existing building that would be kept at the same, so.
Mr. Chairman, I think with the variables involved in this, I sense the mood is we want to figure out how to make this work. And I think too, when I look at these maps, I've been on a lot of these committees, and we move these lines around fairly regularly based on the whims and needs of the neighborhood. So, and I like Ben's argument that this property is literally on the line, literally, and I could probably make an argument to make a discretionary call. So I therefore make a motion to approve the requested 5-year exemption on the balance of the remodel and expansion.
Very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So based on that,
Mark, go ahead. No, go ahead.
so based on that, we would, as a group, want to revisit the map, because it's all, if we do it and we have leeway, we're gonna get into the same situation before, where we have a policy that we're making exceptions on when we haven't completed the policy. So we're getting in this cycle again of having that exact same discussion. So if we can, you know, kind of pend it as, we have to, if we're gonna do this, then we have to go back and look at what makes sense for the map, so that we are consistent in what we're approving to what we're seeing, so we don't have another issue of the same thing happening. So I would be in favor if we can definitively say the map also has to be addressed.
Yeah, I can work with the planning department. We can kind of go take a closer look at these lines, rather, it's sort of easy to draw a line down 7th Avenue, but it depends on what's on the other side of the street, whether we want to encourage redevelopment or not.
Or even just a policy language change that says, or any property adjacent to this line or something like that. I agree. It's good to codify that or get the policy clarified.
Yeah, I think that would be fair, because we don't want to fix one side and then have, you're looking at something that can also be adjusted accordingly.
So my question is, do we really need a motion for that, or can we just note that down to make sure that we follow that?
I think it would be good to have a motion to forward this to City Commission for approval, and then we can follow up on that, either a motion on that, or we can simply, take your direction and come back with a policy change.
Because I think this, this recommendation will go to the commission to deviate from the policy to go with the 5-year on this.
So then my question is to the motion maker, do you want to have that in addition to your motion, or would you rather have a second motion, separate motion? We had a little bit of an issue with this last night, so I am not the authority on who to do that, because I think we screwed it up last night, so. But I guess that would be my question for you, Jim. Would you, and what do you think the best procedure would be? Because I think you want to make sure you follow the right path.
Well, it probably wouldn't hurt to have a separate motion.
Okay.
And it shows that we are continually reviewing the policy and needs for changes in the policy.
So if this is okay with the group, we'll vote on the first motion, and then we'll have a second motion. Is that all right with everyone? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, or opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And now we'll be open for another motion and Jessica, if you want to, you worded it very well specifically about, so if you want to do that, we would appreciate that.
A motion to look at the policy and adjust to include adjacent properties from a submission for application for an incentive.
Thank you very much. Ben, do you have that? Mm-hmm. He's writing furiously, I appreciate that.
I just had a question or a comment on the order of agenda.
Just wait,
Oh,
so-
excuse me.
We got to have a second.
Oh.
I ran into a lot of bad things last night. We were keep losing track of things.
I'll second the motion on
Have
the
a
table.
motion, a second. Now do we have discussion? Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. So with regard to the order of agenda when it gets to the commission, so then does the order to adjust the map come first? And if that passes or fails, and then the tax exemption, because I think there will be some discussion about following policy.
Right.
And so wouldn't you want the second motion to be first on the agenda?
Correct.
Yes,
Okay.
I would, in my opinion, I would say so.
I'm just trying to think through the semantics of, because of protocol.
I think that's a good idea.
And there's no published hearing or anything for this exemption, so I can hold it till we deal with the policy before the commission and then put it on the next commission. So they won't, because we won't have the policy done until our next meeting next month.
Any further discussion?
Just from a procedural standpoint, everybody kind of understands the purpose of the language, but typically, when those language changes were made, this committee would actually review them, give them a stamp of approval before they went up to the commission. And maybe with this one, because it is relatively minor, there isn't a presumption that that process should be followed, but I think it maybe should at least be considered. I know it's gonna maybe, I don't know, mess with this particular application because it's deviating from an existing policy.
Could we do I think that would be a good protocol to keep. Could we do then like an email vote? If the verbiage is pretty straightforward, we can send out the policy and that not hold up the process for, can that be done?
And the change might simply be after Jim, reviews the boundaries, that the map changes, and that might be the only change. Because
So I guess the question is, can we do that without having moving this to the next formal meeting? Can we take action? How does that go?
I would think so. I guess Eric isn't here today, but.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Oh, is he?
He's just not sitting in his chair.
Oh.
How do you do this? It's red, I don't know if you can hear me, but in any event, I think having an email meeting runs into some open meeting problems, so you might need to find a different solution. Either take the direction, give the direction to Ben and trust that he'll draft the appropriate policy change, or have a special meeting. Can be handled certainly by combination of people in person and then telephone participants as well, if you want to have a special meeting before the appropriate city commission meeting, just to move the ball forward quickly. Those would be two options. Or wait until your next regular meeting. I don't know how that affects the applicants, but it may affect them negatively, but those would be your options, I think.
Just a kind of comment or question for Ben. They could still move ahead with their project and qualify either way. And so I think we could have this at the next meeting, make the policy change, then could take it to city commission. A lot of the applications you see on city commission agenda are for things that have already been constructed, so.
And I guess I'm seeing a nod of the head from so that would, our main thing is we didn't want to inhibit something, especially, this time of year with winter and all that kind of thing. So I think it's important that we do it the right way. And so I think that's the most
For
important.
this particular exemption, the timing is not an issue. We have people that find out a year or two after they've made their remodeling that they're eligible for the exemption, and they're still qualified to get it, or eligible to get it.
So I guess if that's okay with you, at our next meeting, we'll have Ben work on it in the interim, and then we'll have it addressed at our next meeting, and then we'll act on that at the city commission level after that. Does that sound good to everybody? So we took action on the first motion. See, that's why we always do motions and then we don't move on, because some of these things get lost. So if any other discussion, are we ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now we're on to number 3, Renaissance Zone Development Plan Update. Mark.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mark with the City of Fargo Planning Department. And I'm just here to give a brief update on the Renaissance Zone Development Plan. The city's been fortunate enough to be a part of the Renaissance Zone since 1999. We're required to do a 5-year update every 5 years, thus the reason we're going through this at this point by the state. And so after this plan would be updated, it will be through 2024, the plan will be updated again. Currently, we've had an open house and also a few other activities to do some consensus building out in the areas, including interviews for people that have actually participated in this program. And we are currently modifying our existing plan to update and reflect on the Downtown in Focus plan as well as the GO 2030 plan. Some of the discussions have been changing a couple blocks. With this newly proposed plan, we removed, it was block 22, which is the old Woodrow Wilson property that has been completely developed. And in addition, we've added block 57, which is a parking lot, Lake Agassiz Regional Development Corporation, Bell Bank, and the GTC. There's been many discussions with many stakeholders through the process talking about these blocks. We're allocated 49 blocks by the state. Right now we have 47 identified on this map. That gives us the flexibility of 2 additional blocks as projects may come about. We still need to present to the Cass County Commission and the Fargo School Board, and presenting it to the City Commission with hopes in finishing this plan December-ish. That being said, I'm here to answer any questions, and feel free to ask me. Hopefully I can answer them.
So Mark, if you don't mind, so when you talk to these different groups, so do you tell them like what the impact has been? Like we have some excellent numbers as far as what the original property values were, and then after the Renaissance zone, do you have some of that and do you share that? Or is this mostly getting feedback as to what blocks they want to have and move and things like that?
We hired KLJ to help assist us with this plan, and we are currently working on some solid numbers to be able to demonstrate that. But yes, we do convey that and how important it's been for the development. A lot of the discussions have been property owners talking about interest as far as projects that they might have in the future.
And so that's the main focus of this, is kind of just to help steer us for the future. And so if you don't mind me asking, how is that, you've met with some of the, potential blocks, how has that gone?
Well, to the point where I don't think we'll be changing our procedures very much based on how some of the projects have gone. I know sometimes some of the application procedures have been a little bit unclear, and I think we're going to try refining those as a result of this.
And I know this is not the Renaissance zone, but I think what we were hoping for was some of that discussion would maybe pique some interest with some of the people. Do you think that's happened?
Yeah, I would think so. This is the plan to tell the state sort of what our plan is and how we want to go about administering this program. But there's other avenues that can be part of that, and like for instance, showing the increased value more sells the plan and the project. And based on questions that we have had, we have used some of those numbers.
Jim, I think we have a lot of that in-house, some of the actual numbers as to how it's performed and all that. And so if we can, I'm sure you already know this already, but I'm just.
We have some of that information from having to go out and speak to interim committees at the legislature that shows the value of the property downtown, going from under 200 million to over 700 million. So that by itself really demonstrates the importance of this program.
But I just think for you to make sure you have all that information to share is very important, because it's been phenomenally successful. But even now, we still get, people ask questions, which is a good thing. But I think if we have the facts, being able to show what's going on, I think that's a good thing.
Maybe to help answer that question, in our new plan in 1999, the value was approximately 197 million. In 2018, it's somewhere around 550 million. However, there has been blocks that have come and gone based on that boundary, so it's talking about what the boundary would have been in 99 and talking about where the boundary is today, as far as using kind of two different properties.
Very good. Mark?
I've always got questions, right?
No, that's good. That's,
I'm
anybody else?
not sure if this is for Mark or maybe it's for Jim, but, so the two blocks that aren't assigned right now, is the zone authority kind of holding those in reserve in case a project would come up that might qualify or benefit? Or is it just that the number of blocks has changed over time and the zone authority just hasn't kind of figured out where to place those?
When we did the last update with additional blocks, we just, we probably had, maybe say 10 blocks that might work well, but we only had 5 to pick from. And so the idea was, well, let's keep some in reserve so that if a project comes up, we can add a block without having to take a block away, because that kind of doubles the process, because you don't want to take one away and then find out later that something was in the works. And so it was better to have sort of some candidate blocks, and then hold those so that we could move quickly. And we have done that. I think in the last plan we had about 5 blocks, and then we've added some. For instance, that block 55 in the upper right-hand corner was added. The one with the Radisson Hotel, that was one where we didn't expect anything, and now we'll have that police station available for redevelopment. So it was important to add that block, and again, not having to go take that Renaissance zone status away from someone.
And then during the next 5 years of this application, will there be any blocks that will be essentially completed that will be coming out and freeing up so that they can be applied to other blocks? Or will all of these, as they're shown today, kind of exist through the end of this current cycle?
I mean, I think some will be completed, again, at Block 55, that's a one, development, and if that proceeds, and when it proceeds, then that one could be removed again. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. There's, but, that's one. There might be some others where, we just decide that, project's not gonna go forward. We had a long discussion last night on the Civic, Plaza, that blocks in. If the city decides not to make that available for redevelopment, then that block could be removed. But if it's gonna be available for redevelopment, then that would stay in. I'm trying to think of any others, but there probably are some that will come out and be completed.
Anything to add? I think it was basically the two, it's a little bit quicker if you have to subtract it, that takes time. So that was not to speak for the Renaissance Zone, but I'm on it, but it was basically, then it doesn't take as much time. If you had
Makes
somebody.
sense.
That was the thinking.
Maybe just to touch on a little bit more, the requirements are that each block, they need to be contiguous or catty corner. But also there's an opportunity for one satellite block that is block 55, and adding a little bit more with what Jim's saying. The zoning's in place, the platting's in place, the plans are in place to build that, so I anticipate that to build out fairly quickly. And if we see any other sites that kind of build out to that 100%, we would have the opportunity to be able to move those around too.
I had a couple questions. How, with it coming every 5 years, how are you, or what's your opinion on how tightly knit this plan is to the city's larger strategic plan? And have there been any adjustments made in this new revision that would additionally support the city's long-term goal and strategic plan?
That's a good question. Part of the process that we're going through now is to making sure how close this is to our downtown in focus plan and our comprehensive Go 2030 plan. I can't specifically name what we've pulled out, but I know we've pulled out areas that have been inconsistent with some of those plans that were pertinent back in the day, but however, since the downtown has evolved, things have changed where they're no longer necessary.
And then with adding block 57, you mentioned reference to stakeholders. Who are the groups that you're talking to? Is it a mix of individuals, or is it actual, groups or business individuals? Who are those stakeholders?
Well, the governmental entities are the stakeholders. The property owners in the area are stakeholders. Some of the individuals we spoke with have interest in purchasing property downtown with the idea of doing a project. So it's kind of a full spectrum of individuals.
And if that's where you're acquiring the information on how to add a new block and where it's located, how are you prioritizing those comments? Because they're going to be more qualitative in nature. So, to decide to keep two in reserve, how are you doing that? How are you prioritizing those comments?
There's objectives in the plan that outline the prioritization based on projects. And we go through that process for each application that comes in. That helps us prioritize the projects. I know we've been working on sort of narrowing that scope down a little bit because it was pretty broad and pretty subjective in our prior plans. But the other half of that question is, a few years ago, and I'm not familiar, this was before my time, the state actually increased the number of blocks. So really, there's not as much pressure from individuals interested in this as there used to be as far as trying to prioritize those blocks. We have a few more that we're able to be a little more flexible with.
And then my final question, do you see anything that you feel like is lacking in the plan that you need support from additional groups to make this a successful project? Or a successful plan?
Not at this point. To be honest, I've been here 18 years. I moved up to Fargo in '96, and to see what the Renaissance Zone has done for the downtown has been unbelievable. Coming from a planning perspective and a planning background, other than just wholehearted support in this plan and continue to go with the efforts of incentivizing opportunities in downtown.
Wonderful. Just want to make sure you have all the tools available to you to be successful.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? That was kind of an update, so thank you very much for doing that. And I would say if anybody on this group is interested about more information about the Renaissance Zone, I think Mark would be happy to talk to him. And obviously we all kind of are working on the same direction, hopefully. And so the one thing I will say is once a Renaissance Zone project is on a property, then that's it. You can't apply for another one 10 years later or something like it's a one-time thing. So it's kind of like a self, I don't know.
Regulating, yeah.
You know, it expires. And so I think that's kind of interesting how it works. I like that concept. But it was kind of interesting. Some people are viewing it as an asset and they don't want to use it right now. They're like holding it for, which is kind of interesting. And I guess everybody has their own perspective, but I thought that was kind of cool. Jim?
The other block that'll be completed, and I can't believe I missed this one, is Block 9.
That's an easy one to remember. That's a good point. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, it is 1:31 on a beautiful windy day.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mark.
Good. So I am sitting today as my last meeting as the ex officio representative serving West Fargo Public Schools. My predecessor is at the end of the table, Levi Bachmeyer, comes to us, policy advisor for the governor's office, will be serving as the business manager for the West Fargo Public School District, and will actually sit as the ex officio member from the school district for this committee next month and forward.
Well, thank you. And so obviously welcome Levi, but Mark, thank you very much for your participation. You've done an excellent job. You asked a lot of very good questions and been an excellent member. So unfortunately, we don't have a big cake or the surprise streamers aren't going to come down. So if you would have warned us ahead of time, we would have had that already.
Hence the reason for springing it on you.
But on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. We've appreciated you participating, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of it too. It's a good group.
I've enjoyed it. I think it's been since '99. When was something like that? That's about right. So a couple of years.
So
Maybe Jim's got a few more years than me, but
97.
yeah.
So thank you very much for all you've done. And I do think the whole symbolism of having West Fargo participating in Cass County and the school, it's all very important because it impacts everybody and it's a very worthwhile thing. So thank you very much on behalf of us. We appreciate your hard work. Very good. Now it's 1:32 on a beautiful afternoon. Thank everybody for coming, and we are adjourned.